Where to run? Where's safe? Gunshots ring out. Children scream in terror. There's chaos, panic. Help us, God, help us, O Arabs, he screams.
This is my grandson. I don't know where his mother is. He's just 20 days old. What can I do with him now? Where can I go with him? Where can I find his mother and father? Please tell me where to search. We're tired. We can't cope anymore.
The stream of people fleeing looks endless. Close to 500,000 Gazans ordered to leave their already destroyed homes by the Israeli army as they launch a fresh assault on Khan Yunis, accusing Hamas of firing rockets from the area. A brother pulls along his sister, too weak to walk. Little legs struggle to keep up in the heat. An elderly woman sits down on the side of the road. Is it better to die here than keep on running and running? Amongst the crowd, 3 young siblings. We saw many people who were dead in front of us. Their stomachs were cut open, he says. We don't know where our parents are now. Are we in a safe place now, one asks. Thank God, he sighs. But where to go now? The so-called humanitarian zone Israel has told them to flee to has been repeatedly targeted too. Practically Gaza's entire population has been displaced, time and time again. This is the fate of those who couldn't escape in time. Patients sprawled on the floor of an overwhelmed hospital. Helpless parents look on. Outside in the courtyard, the grief is too much to bear. Bodies taken away to be buried. Just 70-odd miles away, a different world. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu setting off from Tel Aviv for Washington, D.C.
I will tell my friends on both sides of the aisle that regardless who the American people choose as their next president, Israel remains America's indispensable and strong ally in the Middle East.
But Netanyahu faces anger at home. Protests over the weekend calling on him not to fly out without agreeing a ceasefire deal that would see Israeli hostages returned. Today, the military announced the deaths of 2 more in Gaza. Talks are taking place, but progress is painfully slow. Back in Khan Yunis, Palestinian anger is at times directed at Hamas too. But it's Israeli bombs they're fleeing from. And who can tell Gaza's children when their suffering will end?
Sukunda Kamani reporting there. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Elbridge Colby, who was Deputy Assistant Secretary of State of Defence under President Trump. And I began by asking him if he were to become National Security Advisor if Mr. Trump won, what might he advise on the war in Gaza?
I'd be honored to serve if asked, and in whatever capacity I could make a difference. But I think the perspective I hear a lot more from President Trump is working with our allies and partners, no matter really often in the case, for instance, of Islamic monarchies or Islamic affiliated monarchies, no matter if their style of governance matches our own, but if their interests are aligned and having a realistic approach, putting more pressure on the Iranians through things like economic sanctions and their proxy groups.
So very much sort of standing back, because we haven't seen Donald Trump say a lot about the Gazan war. I mean, is his theory, his view, really, that this is something that's going on a long way from America, we should just withdraw a little bit?
I mean, my own view is, look, these contests have been going on for a while. I don't think there's any question that it's a human tragedy what's happening in Gaza. But of course, it was Hamas that began this conflict by killing 1,200 Jews back in October. And I think the view of many of us is it would be better if there could be a more decisive approach that did go after Hamas, certainly its military elements that are still outstanding, and not sort of go for half measures that in a similar way is happening in Ukraine, where you get a sort of unhappy median result.
When you look at what's happening on the ground in Gaza, though, that doesn't look like half measures. That looks like an obliteration.
Well, I think it's a war, obviously. And I mean, you have to also look back at what happened in October and the fact that Hamas precipitated a war and is hiding among the civilian population.
And when it comes to Ukraine, Donald Trump has made some pretty extravagant boasts about what he might be able to achieve there in the first 24 hours of becoming president. Inevitably, looking at his running mate J.D. Vance as well, he has been quite vocal about withdrawing support to Ukraine. Is that inevitable now if Donald Trump takes office?
Well, again, I don't speak for them, but I mean, a couple points. First, I certainly support the idea of making peace and a negotiated peace in the case of Ukraine. And you know who else does? Well, the Biden administration's official policy is that the war will end through negotiation. So President Trump seems to be just explicating something that has remained latent, even as a war has gone on for 2.5 years without a foreseeable end at this point. So it's much better to reconcile and be clear with our European allies, as well as with the Ukrainians, about what we can realistically supply. The Europeans need to step up.
Wouldn't China look at what America, in your view, should do on Ukraine and, pull back support? And China might see that as weakness.
The main thing the Chinese are looking at, in fact, the Chinese are behaving as I would fear, which is that they're kind of bleeding us out, basically, and refocusing us on Europe and the Middle East, much to their advantage, even as they prepare for conflict. So the most important thing that we should do is, as Senator Vance has said, focus our scarce resources in the Asia-Pacific theater.
So let the Europeans focus on Ukraine while you handle China.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, I think we could still be involved in Europe and still remain committed to NATO. That's my view, but in a more focused and sort of moderate way.
And do you think whoever's in the White House is going to face, or do you fear that they're going to face war with China in the next 4 years?
Nobody knows. Anybody who's telling you they know what's going to happen is not credible. What we do know, and what the Biden Secretary of the Air Force says, is they are preparing for war. So it's only prudent to assume that. And the best way to avoid that is from a position of strength while also being prepared to come to a modus vivendi with Beijing.